Hello, everyone. This is Victoria Vesna, and you're listening to Vibrations Matter. In this episode, I'm happy to share my conversation with Lisa Schonberg, an artist and researcher whose work quite literally opens our ears to worlds of insects that usually remain out of reach. Lisa recently completed her PhD exploring ecoacoustic composition and more than human listening. And I have to admit, this was the first time that I encountered myrmecology, the study of ants. Her dissertation, Speculative Ecoacoustic Composition Systems Listening to Insects Through Music, reflects a broader inquiry into insect sound worlds where ants become one important entry point into a larger practice of deep listening, ecological attention, and sonic imagination. Recently, I was able to meet Lisa in person and listen with her when she participated in one of our feast events that I co organized with Ellen Levy at CPW in Kingston, New York. This gathering of ecocentric artists was curated by Lisa's mentor and my longtime friend and colleague, Kathy High, whose influence on feminist, ecological, and interspecies art practices has been profound. Lisa created a beautiful and subtle setup just outside the center, along the edge of the parking lot, going normally completely unnoticed. Using sensors and microphones, she invited audiences to listen not only to ants, but to other tiny creatures moving just beyond human perception, insects, vibrations, and microactivities happening all around us, yet usually invisible and inaudible. Standing there and listening together felt like a quiet recalibration of attention, a reminder that ecological awareness often begins with learning how to listen differently. Lisa's practice moves fluidly between sound art, field recording, ecological research, and performance. I'm sure you're going to enjoy this conversation, and you may find yourself listening to insects and ants in particular with new ears. Thank you for doing this. I was eager to talk to you for quite a while. I am uh, obsessed with sound and especially frequencies that you can't hear or that we're not aware of. So even if we hear them, that we're not registering them. The most obvious one being birds, right? We just kind of they're on the sidelines, but there's actually so much more going on. So I was excited to see you at work. I've been familiar with what you're doing for a while. And my question really is, how did you get here? How did you end up with the ants? Like, what was the journey to that? Like, if you dial back to when you were a child, maybe, or in school, like, what was the aha moment or moments that led you to where you are, where you actually started so deeply thinking and working with ants and other insects and really kind of expand on that, just dial back to the
Yeah. Yeah, I guess there's a few aha moments in this story, but I have always been into music and sound. When I was a little kid, I knew that I wanted to perform as a musician, and since I was little, I knew I wanted to do like public facing performance work. Even before I played music, I was doing lip syncing and dancing with my friends in the yard or whatever. And also, I was always really curious about beyond humans. I mean, I call them that, but and I lived on Staten Island, so although our exposure might have been more than, say, if I lived in Manhattan and a lot of places, but it was very limited. But there were ladybugs, and there were praying mantids, and there were lightning bugs, and so insects were immediately available to interact with, and I didn't like realize that I was getting into insects in particular while I was like,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
it wasn't actually ants. I treated ants pretty badly because people would, when I was dropping ice cream on this, I remember so many times this happening, dropping ice cream on the sidewalk and this like someone's parent coming and hosing the ants away. And I was just, I knew there was something disturbing going on there, but
That picture of the ice cream and ants is
yeah,
so
I was like,
classic, right?
yeah, and I was just, I was like, that doesn't seem necessary. But I And then I studied environmental studies in college. So I started as a music major. So basically, my life is a story of like the music thing and the environmental interests kind of colliding and then running in parallel, then merging. I started off as a music major, and then I took a course in environmental studies with this professor, Dick Andrus, and he taught the environmental studies one-on-one course at SUNY Binghamton. And he changed so many people's lives, including mine and like a bunch of my friends, because he just introduced us to how it is to just sit and do nothing in the woods. And this is pre-internet,
Mm.
but we still needed this lesson.
When was this?
It
When,
was in the late 90s.
wow. And so if you were you in the same school doing the music major?
Yeah, and I switched because I was losing
Ah,
interest in studying music academically at that time.
what were you studying?
Um, it was
With,
at that time I was in a theory class and musicianship and also performance, and I loved the performance. Um, the theory was interesting to me, and the musicianship was also interesting, but I was doing terribly at it, and I was like, and my mind was like, you already know how to do this. You already know you love it. You already do it in a way that you love. You know you want to perform. I was like, but there was something else I wanted to learn, and then I took this course in environmental studies, and I was like, that's it.
nice.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that the music program was really conservative. They had us learning
Yes.
about Gregorian chants, which were interesting and everything, but even if they had introduced me to stuff from even the 19th century or something at first, I would have like there would have been a click. I'm like 17 years old. And anyways, so I'm going kind of really in depth. But anyway,
No,
so I started,
actually, sorry to interrupt, but I think there's a very, very good point that
yeah,
I can absolutely relate to, where when I had my short studies in music, the musical scales, everything was disconnected. Everything seemed
yeah,
so dry when, like you
hmm
said, you know you love music, that's why you're there, but they somehow reduce it. It was like a reductionist way to approaching music
yeah,
when it enters academia that really just dries you out. So you
yeah,
enter the sounds of the environment then, which is where it's so complex and beautiful and
yeah, and
yeah.
yeah. And my entrance to the environmental studies wasn't even through sound, but it kind of sound was always there. And I just
Yeah.
started taking ecology class at every ecology class that was offered. And then when they asked us to find study subjects for our research projects, I always chose ants. There was this really cool on the in the nature preserve. There was this ridge, and it was lined on either side with basically Formica pennsylvanicus colonies. They have these mound building ants. That's the
Aha,
word they
okay.
used. So there was so many, and I went up there. There was nobody up there, and I just studied these ants. I got really into them. So that's when the ant thing happened. I was like, I could sit here forever
Yeah.
observing these
Yeah.
these girls. And then I took a tropical ecology course, and then my mind was like completely blown at the diversity of insects in the tropics. At that point, I had already decided I was a lifer with the music when I was 9 or 10 years old because I knew I loved it so much. And at that point, when I went to the tropics and also discovered these mound building ants, I was like, I'm gonna do this forever too. And I didn't really know how to combine them. That took a while, but I started doing them in parallel. So, and then the aha moment, like how I came to listening to ants, I probably like 10 years after I did my master's in environmental studies and I focused on ant biodiversity. And I was in Costa Rica and I had a professor, Nalini Nadkarni. Have you heard of her?
No, I have to admit I haven't. Tell us about her.
She's wonderful. She's a canopy biologist and she studies epiphytes specifically. She discovered that epiphytes have like these soil masses that they put roots into in the canopy. Like there's these
Um,
adventitious roots. She like
mhm.
but so she would come into our lab. I worked in her lab, and she would be like, "I brought this hip hop artist to a conference. It was really cool. I'm going to work. I'm going to talk to a rabbi and a pastor, and I'm going to go work with prisoners." And she was just all about reaching out to non-scientists and having this bringing science to the public. And I was like, "There's something there. I'm not sure." I was like, and so because I've always been like, very wanting to perform and share.
Mm,
And I was studying ants in the woods, and I was alone a lot of the time waiting. And I'd sit down and I heard the amazing sounds of the rainforest and started jotting down composition ideas for percussion. Having played in a percussion ensemble in college, I was very much into the idea of eventually composing for my own percussion ensemble. So
wonderful.
yeah, so I started listening and jotting down ideas. And then I was like, is this a thing? There must be people who do this. And this is like 2002, the internet was helpful to an extent, and I
Uh,
found
not quite yet.
but there are
Yeah.
some people in Victoria, no, sorry, excuse me, Vancouver, BC, the World Soundscape Project, like Murray
Yes.
Schaefer.
Yes.
They had made their website. It was like, I think it still looks the same. It's like there was a World Forum for Acoustic Ecology site, and I found it, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is it!" Like, so I um started experimenting more and more with that idea with listening and composing, and then it came back to the ants, just kind of randomly. Like, I started merging the soundscape composition with my percussion, and like fast forward to like 2012, we were doing a artist residency. My percussion ensemble at that time was doing an artist residency in Joshua Tree,
Ooh.
with do you know Andrea Zattel? You probably
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
okay, yeah,
yes.
you're LA. So I lived in Olympia and Portland for 20 years, so we went down the West Coast all the time to play music and such. And so our friend introduced us to Andrew, and she's like, "You should come stay here for a month." And we were like, "What? Yeah, yes,
What an
we will."
amazing residence too, right? Her place.
Yeah,
I stayed in her place. It's gorgeous. It's
with the
really,
little wagon station.
yes, yeah, yeah.
And so we were there for a month recording, and I'd met with this sound artist, Ethan Rose. I was like, "How am I going to record insects and weird stuff in sand?" And he made me, showed me how to make. He mostly made it the first piezo contact mic, and we stuck it in the sand underneath the harvester
Mm.
ant foraging trails, and we heard like this whip, 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 whip kind of thing, and we were just like, what? We played it for everyone. We're like, the ants did that, and nobody, everyone was just like, what? So, I wrote some entomologists. One of them was like, oh, yeah, not that interested. Kind of heard about them making sound, and nobody really responded. And I kind of like put it on the shelf. I was like, we're gonna come back to this. And then I applied for a residency like 5 years later in the Amazon, and there was an entomologist involved in that residency. And I wrote him and I was like, I want to record ants. I did it once. It was really interesting. And he's like, what? Ants make sound? And I was like, yeah. And so I've been working with him ever since. And his name is Fabrizio Baccaro. And he was on my PhD committee. And another scientist joined as an undergrad, and her name's Erica Valle, and she's now going into a PhD program. So we've been working together since like in various forms, like at different levels. Sometimes we'll go a while without doing anything, and then we'll join together in the field or publish something. But since 2017. So, yeah.
So you actually came to the scientists saying, "Hey, you know what? They're making sounds," which
Yeah.
went kind of unnoticed in that community, right?
Yeah. And it turns out some people had been looking at it, but it was like kind of sitting,
Like fringe science.
yeah, like, yeah, kind of. And it was interesting because I'd written a few people who were known for studying insect sound, and they admitted that they had dismissed the ant sound because it wasn't as flowery. and sort of melodic as some other insects sounds like
Right.
cicadas or tree hoppers, and so they didn't think there was much there. But more and more people have listened, and there is a lot
So is
there.
it
So
like a group chorus that happens? Tell us more
yeah,
about what is the communication that you've been following and detecting and what the scientists helped, how
yeah.
the scientists helped with that.
Yeah, and they've been doing more of the quantitative stuff and making these delineations. But what is known is basically that certain subfamilies of ants have a stridulatory organ. So basically, the ants that don't have the stridulatory organ can't stridulate. And it's a ridged surface and a scraper between two segments of their body, basically between two waist segments or between the last waist segment and the wait, between the last waist segment and the first segment of the abdomen, which they call the gaster, or the first two segments of the gaster.
So it's the
And
it's the whole body, in other
yeah, and
words.
they buck. They basically like buck their gaster to make the kind of sound. And since there's an up and a down in some of their calls, you can hear it and you could see it in the recordings. They're like, the two
Mm-hmm.
sounds. So that's like a bisyllabic sound. Some other ants only have like the one. Somehow they move that it just
Mm-hmm.
kind of like when you play a guitar, you could go up and down, or you can go, um, yeah. So, and they found differences between castes, like so between different kinds of workers and a queen, um,
Mm-hmm.
and then also between species, and um, yeah. So, and they use it for they've there's research that shows that they use it for foraging, like to recruit other ants. They use it to tell ants like where a good resource might be, or
Mm-hmm.
just to like come this way, or and if a nest collapses, they use it as an alarm sound to call other
Interesting.
ants to save them.
Mm.
If a nest tunnel collapses,
Yeah.
um, they use it for defense calls. My collaborator Erica, she did a study where we use baits a lot to study them. We put out
Mhm.
some fish and farofa, which is like a corn. Is it corn? No, 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 it's a yucca-based grain and tuna mixed on a vegetable paper,
Mhm.
and put the contact mic underneath the paper, and then wait. And in like 15, 20 minutes, a bunch of ants will come, and sometimes more than one species will come. And Erica counted encounters between these species to see if the aggressiveness was correlated with how much sound they made. So
Wow.
looking at that, not that much is known. Like every question is like, well, we kind of, So yeah, we've recorded species, well, genera that pretty sure no one had at least published the sounds of before. So it's exciting when you hear something you're like, wait,
I know. It's very
and
cool.
and then sorry, yeah, but that yeah, so
So why are ants important?
um, they are
Because there are many, many, many,
yeah,
many,
yeah, yeah.
many, right? I mean, is there a sense of how many are on the planet or in areas or,
There was this article that came out a couple years ago, and it was like in the popular media, and I should have this I think it was like 2 million ants per human being, or they had some
yeah,
ratio showing like the numbers of individuals and also like how much their biomass, how huge their biomass is.
right. So I remember coming across that somewhere too and being kind of like, wow. So they must have a major purpose in
Yeah.
the ecology or the biome of the
Hmm.
earth, right? Like they're kind of like an external biome that we're seeing that's
Yeah.
moving and is it endangered? Are ants endangered?
There's so many species. There's like 14 or 15,000 known species. So, and so many unknown.
What?
And so,
Really?
yeah,
Wow. 14,000 species. We're so illiterate. It's just
I
unbelievable. It's
yeah.
unbelievable.
And so like within that, there's some species that are just fine and other species that are so rare to begin with or specialized that they may not fare that well.
Right.
Um, and then there's some species that do really well on the edges of forests and stuff. They're gonna be awesome, or and tree falls. So yeah. And then it really depends what species could move more. But the reason that ants are so successful, and termites also really successful is because they're social. So they have the social structure that enables them to
Right.
become so successful. Um,
Right,
yeah,
right, right.
yeah. So
So how did you now circle back to your music, to
yeah,
performance, to combining these two worlds that were running in parallel
yeah,
for a long time, maybe overlapping occasionally, but I think you're
yeah.
at a point where you are combining them. And is
hmm
this part of your PhD, what you're working
Yeah.
on?
Yeah, so I just finished my PhD in August, which feels really, really good.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And what I did is yeah, I made well previous to the PhD, I was listening to ants and other insects and environments and using different compositional approaches to make music that I would then perform at my percussion ensemble. And then I started my PhD when the pandemic hit, so couldn't really perform. And there were these resources to learn about Max MSP and spatial sound and NPAC, like the Performing Arts Center. So I went in that direction. And so since I started my PhD, I've been composing with that intention in mind, but also with the percussion in mind. And I've done some of that, and I've combined them. So I've done spatial sound with live percussion. Um, and then as far as how the ant sound and the other sounds, I say like the sounds of ants and their associates. Um, so how those sounds become music is like a number of different ways, but for my PhD, I developed a system, like a modular system that could be adapted to environments. Yeah,
Is
so
this system that you use or you make available to others?
I haven't made it available to others. I guess it is in my PhD now that says how I did it. I would make it available to others. It's not like a unit, but it is basically, for the most part, with a few exceptions, all stuff that I bought from other places and then put into combination in a
I
certain
see.
way. So like contact mics that most people who record vibratory sound, you know the Jez Riley French
Yeah,
contact mic? Yeah, like
yeah.
use those for a lot of it. And yeah.
So you basically developed a system using hydrophones, contact mice, all this, but you created your own combination that could be called an instrument, or how would you define it? Just a kind of a way to improvise with it?
Yeah, I call it like a composition system.
Okay.
And I mean, in some way, it's an instrument. It's interesting because what Kathy High, my committee chair, and
Yes.
she actually suggested that the instrument is the plant or the soil that the insects are vibrating through, making their
Uh-huh.
sound through. But yeah, it could be considered. I consider it more of a system. But wait, and then you asked. Sorry, I totally missed the last part.
No, if you imagine it as an instrument, is
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
was
yeah,
asking. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, what is the title of your PhD?
Is listening to insects, speculative ecoacoustic composition systems.
So it's more than ants. Which other insects did you
Um,
address or listen to?
and insects that live around ants or with ants mainly,
Like,
from like 98%. So springtails, I ended up recording for some of it. Sometimes it was just incidental, like, and I'm not even sure who it was, but I'd have a microphone and I'd hear something that sounded heavier than an ant or something, but it didn't like see what it was. So something that's on an ant habitat. And then the plants themselves, so the plants as the substrate for the sound that give it the certain
hmm
tone or um, Who else?
So
Ants.
the
Wow.
ants are the center, and then you have the other kind of part of the community
Yeah.
that it's becoming like an insect interspecies, I guess, where they just
Yeah.
manage between themselves, and that becomes part of it. Yeah.
Bees. I recorded a bunch of bees and wasps, um, bee
So
nests.
how do bees relate to ants?
Um,
Is,
I
is
haven't seen them interact where I was recording them, but they just share the same habitat. So
I see.
my definition of the associates is like, oh, they're in the same
I
mound
see.
of bare dirt and they're nesting 3 feet away from each other. So it may
Yeah.
be like a direct association or not. So it's
Right, right.
the microhabitat that the ants are in.
Got it.
And then yeah, so
And then what is the name of your percussion ensemble?
secret drum band.
Why secret?
I came up with that name when I was like 22, and I don't know.
Oh, it's been going on for quite a while.
Yeah, and I've wanted to change it, and I've had long debates with my friend who has co-directed it with me on and off. His name's Alan Wilson. We
Uh-huh.
wanted to change it before our last album came out, and I can't even remember. I think I was like, secret was a funny word to choose because I wanted to be known.
Right, right. But it reminded me, I thought,
Hmm.
and maybe this was not conscious, I thought of Secret Life of Plants. And I
Yeah,
thought maybe that kind of influenced the idea of secret. But it's really not a secret, it's more hidden.
hidden.
It's
Yeah.
how to make something that we take for granted, that we don't notice, we don't hear, we don't care, and make it part of our
Hmm.
kind of consciousness or just daily living. I think
Yeah.
it's really important work because people have got so disconnected,
Hmm.
and everyone's in the harsh kind of visual consumer culture. So it's very difficult to say, hey, listen to the bees and the ants and the birds. It seems
Yeah.
so silly, right? But then you realize it's quite profound and it shifts your way of seeing and being in the world. So I think it's really important to put it out there as your band. So when you work together
Mhm.
on your performances, how do you approach it so that people understand that these are sounds of insects, ants, and etc.?
Yeah, the performers themselves, I most of the people I've been playing with, I've been playing with on and off for a long time, so they know the gist of it, and I'll always make a point to explain,
Okay.
because I think it does affect how someone might approach playing. And I like,
Yes.
you know, and then there's up until my PhD, there was always like a, actually with the PhD also to some extent, there was an electronic musician, so who played various combinations of synthesizer, processed guitar, processed voice. It always changed depending on the person, which I liked because they'd
Hmm.
interpret it differently. But I gave them the field recordings
Oh,
when I used to do
nice.
that, and I'd say, and I gave them a dynamic map, and I said, use these here and make them feel like this, and then here have them come in this
Great,
way.
great.
Here, do whatever you want with them. And so I definitely explained to them like what they were, where they came from, why I was, what was interesting to me about it, and then let them put their own take on it to some extent.
It's very cool. So it's a
Yeah.
very different way of composing, really.
Hmm.
Do you do you draw your compositions to explain this?
Yeah. For the percussionists in the band, they get sheet music, so they
Uh-huh.
get like a fixed composition with notes and stuff that might have
Mhm.
improv sections, and then the electronic musician, yeah, I give them a graphic score sometimes, or
Nice.
sometimes a combination of text, graphic score, regular score, depending on what works best. Yeah.
Do you have those available to be seen somewhere? on your
Yeah, I have
site
a
or something?
couple on my website.
Okay.
I could
Well,
send you
look.
them too. I'm like,
Okay.
do I have them on my shelf? I'm like,
No,
there's
it's
like
okay.
binders full of them.
Yeah, yeah.
I used to do it all in pencil, and I really liked that. And then my bandmate was like, Lisa, we can't see, like, it's dark or we're performing, you know. So we started doing using Muse Score. So.
And so when you perform live, how do you make the audience aware of what they're listening to? Do you do kind of an introduction or do you have visuals that accompany what you're
I've
doing?
We've done both. One tour that we did on the West Coast, we asked for Portland-based visual artists to make music videos for performance. So we had four different videos that we would perform in front of, and we wore outfits on that tour that the projections could be seen on, like kind of really
Hmm.
light. I think it might have been very light colored pastel. And
Hmm.
so we've done that, but I tend to usually talk a little bit about the songs in between,
Hmm.
um, just like briefly to give the context. Yeah.
So what now? What do you feel like your goal is now with all these different journeys coming together and with the ant colonies being out there in the world? What is your idea or what you're working towards now?
Um, well, I want to refine what I did in the PhD, but most mainly what I want to do is like kind of look back at where I was before the PhD because I was so focused on the drummers, the themselves and the electronic musician. And then I've done this huge study of what I could do with Max MSP and spatial sound, and I've tried or I did do it at MPAC once, um, where I combined them, but I really want to focus on that. So I want to bring those things together now and focus on bringing the percussion together with the sound. And yeah, so I lived on the West Coast when I was regularly doing the percussion ensemble before. Now I'm on the East Coast. I've been starting to talk to people, and yeah, and I want to find a position where I could work with students
Yeah.
doing science, like I like your lab is, something like that, like start one or work in one where I can be mentoring students in art science um,
It's
work.
so
So,
it'd be great if you could get a residency in a bio or ecological lab, right? I
hmm
mean, more and more science labs are being open to that, but it's just the
yeah,
funding is so
yeah,
difficult.
yeah.
It's almost impossible. Um, but everything is possible, and who knows what kind
hmm
of world we're going into. We'll see.
I got
Um,
yeah, I got a grant from NISCA to do a project with these
Great.
kids at an art camp about Long Island soils this coming summer. So doing
Oh,
that.
wonderful.
Um, yeah.
So
So
what's the idea? Is it also involving acoustics and sound?
yeah, it's going to be using a really simplified version of the system for
Mm-hmm.
the students to use, and then I'll probably do my own version too and put this all together to make like a series of compositions that can be presented in spatial sound about Long Island soils.
Oh,
So
interesting.
the camp is on 140 acres of woods. So
What? 140 acres. That's amazing.
yeah, it's really cool
Wow.
on Long Island. Yeah.
Wow. Who would
hmm
think?
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
very cool. Can you
hmm
name some of the artists and or scientists who influenced your work or who you were writing about in your PhD that you really felt kind of inspired you?
David Dunn,
Mm-hmm.
really,
Of course.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, his systems of interaction with environments just like really inspire me. And also his writing in his ideas around music as a way to understand. beyond human world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Of
And his work and talking to him got me into Bateson and reading all about that,
course,
which
yeah,
I got a lot from. But then also Pauline Oliveros and
of
her
course.
ideas around listening, and also her ideas around like prompting people to listen to where they are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and who else? Suzanne Thorpe, I'm really excited about her work with the
Really.
oysters. I was like, oh my God, like they're right here. I'm getting really excited about things that are in cities and like, and when I go to the Amazon, a lot of the time I'm in the city and crazy stuff is happening there insect wise and sound wise right in the city, which is in the Amazon.
Amazing.
Yeah. hmm But yeah.
So, do you have you crossed paths with practicing meditation or any of those kind of practices? For instance, Pauline Oliveira certainly has, and it influenced her way of thinking about sound and silence and all the prompts.
Yeah. I've been teaching a freshman course at Parsons this semester, and I
Nice.
taught them about sound for 3 lessons, and I was like, how am I going to get them to listen? So I led a meditation, and I learned how to do that from Stephanie Lovelace through TAing with
Oh,
her, how
great.
to lead like a sort of inspired by Pauline style meditation focused on listening. So it's not the focus of my study, but then again, it is because I'm all about trying to prompt active listening. So I often don't think of it as a meditation, but it is a like sort of really being focused in the moment
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
thing. I do focus on breath in some of my work. I've written a bunch of text scores that are focused on breathing, and it's not only to focus, but also to relax because people are freaked out about insects. So it's like a
That's true. I didn't think of
yeah, so
that.
it's just like a take a deep breath. They're not gonna get you. Yeah. So yeah, meditation in some way. Yeah,
It's
in some
really
ways.
interesting to me how Pauline's work keeps coming back up to
Yeah.
many of us, really. I include
Mm-hmm.
myself. I mean, just combination of these practices that brought in quietness. So at Parsons, I had a short, like 3, 4 years where I was visiting professor at Parsons, and it's I imagine it must have been a real challenge because it was definitely a visual centric program, at least what I encountered.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. Um, I was like, okay, I was like, put down your devices. No, really, put down your devices. We're gonna
Not really,
listen.
not
Close
really.
your eyes. And it worked. They actually said that they enjoyed it. And I heard
Yes.
them giggling, which was fine. Like I was like, yeah, it is kind of awkward, to do this when you're not used to it. And then Suzanne was actually a guest in the class, Suzanne Thorpe.
Ah,
And so she talked to them about her approach, and she spoke about Pauline a lot. I spoke about Pauline came up a lot.
yeah.
And then Suzanne and I went with them to a pier and gave them a sound mapping exercise. And they loved that because they were in a place they'd never been before on this, I think it was Pier 62 or Pier 26, and
Hmm.
gave them like really specific instructions on how to listen. And it, I think they appreciate being made to stop even though it seems like really hard for them to. And I wasn't like watching them. Who knows how much they were looking at their phone while they were doing it, but they did it. They did the exercise. But
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
it's
I find
challenging.
it's challenging, but I find that once the students get into it, they really appreciate it. They
hmm
need, there's a need, literally.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
there's a definite need. So if you could like pull together and summarize what your PhD was about, what the main message was, which obviously is centered, at least I think, in the following and listening to the sounds of the ants in particular. Um, how would you summarize it in a sense to the audience?
Yeah, probably actually when I was reading about the theme of this podcast, it's like that's it. That's what very much in line with the broader theme of this podcast. But to prompt people to reconsider their relations with insects through listening to ants, and in ants environments that we share with them, through music, which is like an aesthetic means of engaging and paying attention,
Mm-hmm.
using that as a means, and coming to appreciate insects, for what they know that we can't possibly know, and how they sense and how they know, and realizing like that there's all this stuff going on in parallel to our sensory reality that we have no access to, and that if we but we can think about it and we can know about it and we can be curious about it and peek into it with our technology. And yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
I mean, it really, to me, brings up a sort of a wonder, that these ants exist in such numbers and they probably play a huge role in our ecology. I'm
Hmm.
sure they do. I don't understand exactly how, but listening to them makes you kind of aware on a kind of empathetic level. And
Hmm.
it makes me also wonder, on the other hand, what would happen if they disappeared?
Yeah, we
Did you
would be
ever did you ever wonder that? Or ask yourself that?
yeah, we would be pretty screwed, because they do so much. I mean, as far as herbivory, seed dispersal, aerating the soil, having partnerships with other organisms, like
Mm-hmm.
multi-layered partnerships, um, that depend on them, as predators, as prey.
Mm-hmm.
Like because of their biomass, like these roles have such an impact because there's so many of them. And it's like it's huge. Yeah, we wouldn't do very well. There's an E.O. Wilson quote, Edward O. Wilson, from
Yes.
this, yeah, the 1987 paper where it's like we would basically perish in several months, but they'd be fine without us. That kind of applies to ants only. Like we'd be kind of screwed without them unless some other organisms developed social, means to take over those roles,
Yeah.
but that wouldn't happen in enough time for us to adjust.
I mean, that's such an important message. And also, if you
Hmm.
think about it, they're global. Like,
Yeah,
where is a place on planet when there's no ants? Is there such a
yeah.
place? No, right?
Antarctica, I don't think there's any ants.
That's right.
I
Okay.
don't think there's any. If there's,
Probably
and
not.
and you know
Probably
what's
not.
interesting? There were no ants on Hawaii until, I think the Polynesians introduced ants. There were
Oh,
no the only, but there were these other like really highly specialized social insects in a genus of bee called Hylaeus, which I actually had coincided. I ended up doing a lot of work on them a bunch of years ago. But yeah, so they kind of filled those roles, but Hawaii is so small, and I think like Hylaeus bees wouldn't be able to have the same impact as ants do
right, right.
worldwide.
So I wonder what's in Alaska, like that's taking on the role of
There's
the ants.
yeah, there's ants up there. Um, just
Uh-huh.
like in the like the what do you call it? The areas that are glacial year
Uh-huh.
round, like there's not ants. There's some flies that live on ice. I saw one once in Banff. It was amazing. Um, but yeah, there's
So
ants in temperate seasonal places.
yeah, yeah. Well, cool. So do you have something you could play for us from your
Yeah.
ant music?
So this is a piece called Tashi, and it was made with my composition system in a forest reserve in the Brazilian Amazon, specifically at a place called the Biological Dynamics of Forest Fragments Project, where they've been studying the effect of fragmentation on forests for decades. And I was there with a bunch of myrmecologists that are studying ants. And as with
Wait, wait,
eye
wait. What is the name of people studying ants?
myrmecologist,
Myrmecologist. Okay.
yes. So myrmecology is the field, and myrmecologist is someone who studies ants. And so we were there for several days. It was amazing, and they all told me about their specialization, and pointed me towards different things, knowing that I was listening for and searching for sounds. And so one of the myrmecologists, Phil Ward, he studies the genus Pseudomyrmex, specializes in that. He's at UC Davis. And he pointed me towards this symbiosis between a species of Pseudomyrmex ant and a plant called Tashigali. And they are obligate symbionts, so they like need each other. They always live together, and the plant provides home for the ant. So this piece, I set up microphones on the plant where the ants were moving. The ants protect the plant in return for the housing, basically. Um, and so they had to avoid them biting. But I set up microphones and I set up playbacks with transducers to play the sound again through the lower part of the stem and then record it back through. And this sound was also going through Max and being processed and sent back in different ways. And so I had like 14 different outputs of audio from which I picked like took slices and got this composition. And then I made a video in Jitter that responded to the sound using the video from the recording set.
Mhm.
So yeah, so that's this.
Let's hear it. So, is there a way to dissect these sounds in the sense that I know when I'm listening to it? So, there was one like
Yeah.
sound. It's the best I can replicate it, but
Yeah.
it was very prominent, and I wish I knew what it was to kind of envision it because the way it's dissected visually and layered acoustically, it's very hard for the human ear to
Yeah.
separate it into different segments.
Yeah, and the visual was something I just made to show it on Instagram originally, and then it
Right.
ended up being a thing that I performed
Yes.
it without the visual. So it's good to hear
Right.
that be like, and it's good to think about that. But yeah, so that sound was locomotion, the sound that you're talking
Aha.
about.
Okay. Okay.
Um, yeah. And in the process of making it, like I end up with um like probably 15 minutes. I do like 3 minutes at a time, maybe 2 minutes at a time of recording. So probably total like 15 minutes in several chunks of this raw compositional material. And
Got it.
then I slice it. The reason there's like all those melodic sounds, because like that one would happen here and then that would happen here. And then sometimes I allow myself to repeat those sometimes, but I don't allow myself to shift things relative to where they happen in time. So I could
I see.
delete and repeat, but I don't. So like if something happened in time, this other thing happened at the same time, I don't like shift them with respect to each other.
Got it.
So I might not include one or include only, one or the other. So
Right,
it's
right.
volume. But yeah, so yeah.
So the compositions are, when performed in public, or let's say people are just listening to it without the visuals,
Hmm.
because the visuals in a way take you away from, you know, how do I explain it? Take you away from dissecting it, or it merges it in a visual way where you start losing the sense of
Yeah.
which sound to follow when.
Yeah.
Which makes me also wonder how working like this and creating these patterns and
Hmm.
layers and having a system, did you have it anywhere where you show how this works? And is this part of what you were writing about and how?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. So like I mean, I have I could open it here at some point. I have to
sure.
like dig a little bit, but
Yeah, yeah.
the projects in Max MSP that I would
I
use
see.
on site, and then I have my field recorder,
Got it.
4 tracks, and then a battery powered amplifier and transducer, one or two pairs of that. Um, yeah, I have photos and stuff of
Yeah.
the setups and
You can send it to me.
okay,
And so, how do the mermologist, is that
myrmecologist.
myrmecologist, how
Yes.
do you spell that?
I could put it in the chat.
Yeah.
MyrmecoloGist. Yeah.
So the MYR stands for
MYR.
MYR.
So yeah, it's kind of funny because the ants,
Myrmecologist, can you break that up? So we know what ecologist is
yeah, mer
MYRM is what?
myrmecin. So the ants as a whole are the Firmicidae, and then there's all these
Okay.
subfamilies. One of the subfamilies is Myrmicinae,
Okay.
and I'm not sure, but I think at some point they might have all been under, and I'm not absolutely sure, but there might have been like that might have been the top name
Well, we
in
learned
the
something
taxonomy. I
new.
need to look it up.
Yeah.
But yeah, but myrmecine is one, if not the biggest, one of the biggest subfamilies within the Firmicidae. Um, so lots and lots of ants in the Myrmicinae. Um, yeah.
And so how has this working with these sounds when you have a myrmecologist listen to it, right? People who are just strictly
Hmm.
focused on this, what's their response? How do they
I
experience it?
interviewed them for my
Oh,
dissertation about
cool.
that. I wrote them like after the fact, because it was so chaotic when we were at the reserve and I didn't think about it, but I wrote them emails probably like 8 to 10 months later and was like, and they sent me back like really a wide range of responses.
Wow,
Some were like, yeah, it was cool, it was interesting, and some were like, it changed my perception of the ants, and I look at and I consider them differently now, so there was a broad range.
interesting.
Um, yeah, they all really appreciated it. I mean, myrmecologists like to talk about ants. I like to talk about ants to excite each other with this
Yes,
information. So,
yes.
they all appreciated it
I
and they
mean,
all,
in a
yeah.
sense, they're like French ecologists, right? Like they have their own specialization. So we
Yeah, yeah.
learned something new. There's myrmecologists. Very cool.
Yeah.
How has this shifted your relationship to silence or to just listening and getting away from technology when you're out in nature?
Um, I've come to value the time when I'm not listening in headphones because I think I've heard a lot of people comment on how we've just started to experience the world through the
Yeah.
documentation process and we get so caught up in it. So, as I was learning how to field record and trying new tools, there was like this sort of leveling out where you're like, okay, this is what I use, this is what I do. And around that same point, it's like, okay, now I really need to keep check on myself and make sure that I'm not becoming addicted to this documentation process and
Right.
being in the place I am and not always having to take it with me. So, that's been an exercise. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's interesting. So in a way, you're self-conscious about it, right? You're
Yeah.
you're doing your work, but you're self-conscious, which couldn't be true for scientists, probably. They're just going for it. Who
Hmm.
knows? Who knows? Well, good. This was really a good supplementary
Okay.
meeting. I really appreciate knowing about myrmecologists.
Oh, yeah.
It somehow relates to more and more. The more I thought about what we talked about yesterday as well, is how related it is to networking and mycelium and these networks of biological biomes and the
Hmm.
main thing to really walk away with is how important it is to think holistically.
Hmm.
And even if we have these very specialized sciences like the myrmecologists, who I just discovered about, that they also are contributing to the sense of the wholeness and the
Hmm.
connectivity of all these other systems. And it's a wonderful thing. I hope that
Yeah.
we managed to give you some more visibility because I think everybody should know about this.
Yeah. Myrmecologists in studying ants are studying this way of being holistic because ants, like this partnership with the plant and the ant, my friend
Yes,
was saying that she thinks that there's some other, I won't go into detail, the cicada that's related to this. Like,
sure.
and then there's probably like microbes that we can't even see that
Oh,
are
yeah,
hanging out and
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. So
Hmm.
much that's not visible for us. We're really just on the surface level, and so much of it is
Yeah.
visual.
Hmm.
To go into the sound really brings you into the invisible, which is why I was wondering about how you approach the visuals. So.
Yeah, that's interesting to talk about with you because it was something I really hesitated on for a while. It's like I'm not doing any visuals, and then I realized that when I posted on Instagram that
People
like, well,
listen. Yeah,
yeah, and then but the thing is,
yeah.
most of my results of my dissertation don't have visuals with them. That was just one. Um, but it is something I think about because it takes away and it all of a sudden you've complicated the listening with the visual indication, like you're saying, it could tell you something else. Yeah.
It could go both ways.
Hmm.
It's a
Yeah.
really delicate balance. I
Hmm.
personally utilize it a lot in my work, but I have to really think and rethink and distill it
Hmm.
so that it doesn't take away from the listening, but actually pulls
Yeah.
you in.
Yeah.
One example is when I was doing a project with birds that had many species and it was listening to different species. I decided to use origami birds as a background just to still make you watch, but take you away from how the bird looks, what it's
Hmm.
doing, because that just becomes a whole nother thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. So I think it's an important thing to introduce into sound art that generally has been kind of poo-pooed as, we should
Hmm.
use no, but it's very purist on many
Yeah.
levels. And that's kind of okay, but kind of becomes also elitist in some ways because you have to understand the language, you have to know the practice, know of the people, the
Hmm.
history, and we just don't have time for that.
Yeah.
The environment is in dire trouble, and knowing about as many natural systems as possible and being in awe of them really just shifts perception for people, even if it's a tiny way.
Yeah.
Um, I think this is wonderful also for children to talk to them about these
Yeah. I
ants.
love I love listening with kids. I've worked the camp and my
And
nieces are really
yeah,
young and I love
they get it
listening with
immediately.
yeah, oh they're so into it and then
Yeah.
they're like, okay, let's give them a cracker and see what happens if the sound changes. My 4-year-old niece, like,
Love
I
it.
have put it to her.
Love it.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Hmm.
Definitely let us know when you're doing a workshop with the kids in
Totally.
Staten Island, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, thanks again.
You're welcome.
Good to
Thank
see
you.
you.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Lisa.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye.